I noticed something unusual when I was weeding my pumpkins one summer. Pumpkins are climbing vines. Yep, they have those little tendril thingies that curl around and cling to anchor themselves to a trellis and help them climb. So I had the bright idea of growing pumpkins on a trellis, and it worked great. The pumpkin vine flourished, with plenty of sun on each leaf and easy access for me to water and fertilize and keep the weeds down. Then it bloomed and started bearing fruit, little pumpkins at first, hanging all over the trellis. Then they got bigger and bigger until... Welcome to the Coming Closer podcast. There are two things Christ asks of each one of us: come to Him and then stay close. Today's episode is about both, and about how easy it is to come to Christ and how sometimes it is not so easy to stay there. Today's episode is called The Tree and the Vine: What a Pumpkin Patch Taught Me About Staying Connected to Christ. I'm James, and I'm still a little embarrassed about what my own pumpkin patch taught me a few summers back. Today, we're setting two of Scripture's most famous analogies of Christ side by side: the tree of life and the true vine, and letting a backyard trellis explain something both of them are trying to tell us. Let's start with the tree. In 1 Nephi chapter 8, Lehi dreams of a tree whose fruit is sweeter than anything he'd ever tasted, and whiter than anything he'd ever seen. His son Nephi later asks what the fruit means, and the answer is simple and enormous. It's the love of God. In the dream, the tree is the one true source. You travel toward it. You hold on to an iron rod and you don't get lost in the mist, and eventually you reach it and partake. Now hold that picture next to a very different scene. It's the night before Gethsemane. Jesus is with his apostles in an upper room, just hours before the agony begins, and he gives them a metaphor about farming. I am the true vine, he says, and my Father is the husbandman. Not the tree this time, the vine. And the word he repeats 8 times in 10 verses is abide. Abide in me, and I in you. Here's what struck me the first time I set these two scenes side by side. They're not two different lessons. They're the same person described two ways, but doing the same job. As the tree, Christ is the source you travel to and receive from. As the vine, He's the source you stay connected to. So that same grace keeps flowing through you and out to whoever's standing nearby. Notice what the fruit is called in both places, because Scripture isn't vague about it. In Lehi's dream, Nephi is told plainly, the fruit is the love of God. In John chapter 15, Christ says almost the identical thing in his own words: continue ye in my love. Same fruit, same source. Everything good that ever comes through you arrives first from somewhere else, and it only keeps arriving as long as you stay connected to where it came from. So why two metaphors instead of one? I think because a single moment of receiving was never meant to be the whole story. Look at what each image actually demands. Reaching the tree in Lehi's dream takes focus and determination. Hold fast, arrive, partake. But the vine in John 15 isn't a one-time arrival at all. It's a way of living, holding on continually, being pruned, being fed day after day, whether you feel like it that morning or not. Put the two together and you get something like a life cycle for a disciple. First you come to the tree and receive. That's the beginning, the moment grace first reaches you. Then you become the branch, and that same life starts flowing outward through you to whoever's standing nearby needing love of their own. Receive, then abide, then bear fruit for somebody else. It's not receive and you're finished. It's receive, and then the real work, staying put, begins. Now back to my pumpkins. The vine had completely covered my trellis. Pumpkins, if you've never grown one, get heavy fast. One morning I walked out and found a good-sized pumpkin lying in the dirt, and it hadn't dropped off cleanly. Its own weight had torn part of the vine away with it. That torn section, cut loose from the rest, dried out within a couple of days, not because anything attacked it, not a pest, not a storm. It just stopped being connected, and the sap stopped flowing, and it withered and died. Why would a vine designed to climb, remember it had those little tendril thingies designed to hold fast, drop its own fruit? Why would it even bear the fruit that it can't support properly? I really thought it would work, but the pumpkin was right there on the ground in front of me. I hadn't accidentally bumped it off, no raccoons during the night, or anything like that. That detail rearranged something for me. I'd always pictured disconnection from Christ as something that happened to you. Persecution, temptation, some outside force prying you loose. But this vine wasn't pried loose by an enemy. It was pulled loose by its own fruit, by the very thing it had spent the whole summer growing. Now read John 15 again, and with that picture in mind, the one line stands differently. Without me, you can do nothing. Not less, nothing. The vine doesn't generate its own sap. Neither does a branch, and neither, it turns out, do we, no matter how much good fruit we happen to be carrying at the moment. Go back to Lehi's dream for a second, because it's already telling us this. In 1 Nephi chapter 8, there's a group of people who make it all the way to the tree and taste the fruit, and then look over at a great and spacious building full of people mocking them, and get ashamed, and wander off, and are lost. Nobody attacked them. Nobody dragged them away. They felt the weight of what other people thought, and it was too much. It pulled them away from the tree. That's the pumpkin. The weight that breaks the connection isn't always sin, and it isn't always an enemy at the gate. Sometimes it's success. Sometimes it's simply how full a good life gets. The promotion, the growing family, the responsibilities that are genuinely good and still somehow leave less and less time for the very thing keeping you alive. What breaks the connection is rarely an enemy. It's the weight of your own life. So here's the part I don't want to skip past, because I think it matters as much as the warning does. Scripture already has a picture of exactly this, and it's a very vivid one. During the Israelites' battle against Amalek, Moses stood at the hilltop with his arms raised, and as long as his hands stayed up, Israel prevailed. But arms get tired, even a prophet's arms. The text says plainly that Moses' hands grew heavy, and when they dropped, the battle started slipping away. So Aaron and Hur didn't tell Moses to try harder. They sat him down on a stone and stood, one on each side, holding his arms up, themselves, until the sun went down. Moses never stopped being the one leading that battle. He just wasn't required to hold his own arms up the entire day by himself. A trellis in a garden isn't the only thing built to hold weight. If a branch is getting heavy and you can feel yourself pulling loose, you're not required to hold on by yourself. Family, friends, a bishop willing to sit with you for an hour, your own Aaron and Hur, whoever they turn out to be. Every one of those is a tie back to the structure, sometimes even a sling, something built specifically to bear a weight you were never meant to carry alone. Needing help isn't a sign the vine failed you, or that you failed the vine. It's just what it looks like to be a living thing growing heavy fruit. The gardener who planted the trellis expected exactly this. He's the one who put those people in your life for precisely this purpose. So far, we've set the tree and the vine side by side, watched a pumpkin explain why disconnection is rarely an attack, and named the help that's built right into the structure for exactly this moment. One more question. What is actually flowing through the true vine? Scripture doesn't leave that question hanging. Lehi himself, in 2 Nephi chapter 2, calls the Messiah full of grace and truth. That's not a phrase Lehi invented on the spot. Centuries earlier at Sinai, when God passed before Moses and spoke his own name out loud, those were his words: merciful and gracious, long-suffering and abundant in goodness and truth. Grace and truth is how God introduced himself to Moses. So when Lehi calls the coming Messiah full of grace and truth, he isn't paying a compliment. He's saying the Messiah carries God's own name. I'll be honest, I've got my own history with a phrase much like that one. Growing up, my mother used to tease me by saying I was full of it. I thought it was funny. I was never quite sure what it was, and I never felt like I should ask. So when I came across Lehi's phrase as an adult, something clicked into place. Christ really is full of it, and the it is grace and truth, saturated all the way through, nothing missing. The very phrase that used to be a gentle tease turned out in Scripture to be the highest name anyone could carry. A few generations later, Alma, in Alma chapter 9, unpacks that same phrase with even more detail than Lehi had room for. Full of grace, equity, and truth, patience, mercy, long-suffering. Alma had been living inside the description long enough to know exactly what it looked like in practice. Put simply, the sap is grace, and it comes from Christ, who is full of grace and truth. The fruit, the love of God, is that grace lived out as truth, and both only reach a branch when it is connected to the true vine. Cut off, and there's nothing to draw on. The branch dies. That's not poetry. That's just how it works. And Christ picked the image on purpose. There's a second half to Lehi's dream we haven't touched yet. Remember those tendrils back at the start of this episode designed to hold fast? Scripture uses those same two words for a whole other group of people at the tree. The text's own description is that they did press their way forward, continually holding fast to the rod of iron, until they came forth and partook. Same rod and same fruit, a completely different way of reaching it, and a completely different reason it worked. That's a story for next week. For today, one image is enough: a tree you come to, and a vine you abide in, and a gardener who already built the support for when the fruit gets heavy. I think about that broken vine more often than I'd like to admit. Usually when I'm working in the garden or carrying a heavy load myself. I know what it's like to feel connected to the grace of Christ, and to feel the grace flowing through you to bless others. And I know what it feels like to be disconnected from that grace. I also know what it feels like to have too much to carry. And I'm so thankful for my family and others who support me during those hard times. I testify that Christ wants us to be connected to the true vine. He wants us to taste of that wonderful fruit and feel His love for us. He's already claimed us as His own. He wants us to be connected to Him. Now that we know more about staying connected to the true vine, what can we do to come closer to Christ? I think I might take stock this week of what's gotten too heavy in my own life lately, and ask myself honestly whether I've been trying to hold it alone. Maybe you'd like to do that too, or let me know if you think of something even better. Whenever your own life feels too heavy, remember there's a tie back to the trellis within reach, and someone who already knew you'd need it. Stay close to the true vine, and don't be afraid to let someone help hold the weight. This has been the Coming Closer podcast. I'm James, and we'll see you next time.